Hello all, and welcome to Stellaris Combat Theory on LawWon Gaming. Today, we're going to review the very first Stellaris Combat Theory I ever made. That's right, today is a Carrier and Strikecraft Day. So, just like last time, let's strap into our cockpit, grab some throttles, and blow where we've clearly blown before. This is Carrier Operations 2.0. In my very first Carrier Operations video, I compared fighters to bombers to see which one ultimately reigned supreme. In that video, we discovered such treats as the God Spot. And no, I'm never going to get tired of that. But we also discovered that fighters will ultimately dominate the battle, while bombers will get in a few good kills before being silenced, at least if they have higher numbers. Things have changed quite a bit since then. If we were to do the same thing today, we could end the video right now, because bombers and fighters had been rolled into the same unit. So today, we're going to answer a few different questions. Number 1. How do the new strikecraft behave in battle? This includes targeting priorities and the like, i.e., do strikecraft still shoot at missiles and each other? Number 2. Do strikecraft benefit from tracking and accuracy bonuses of their carriers? This is important. Number 3. How do strikecraft compare between each other? This includes amoebas, and of course, the swarm strikers. There's also a fourth question that I'm leaving out of this video, but we'll make another video on, and that's how do strikecraft compare to other weapons? So, if you're only interested in that question, and you're in the future, you can skip ahead to that video. Otherwise, stick around, and let's see what we can find out. In previous versions of Stellaris, fighters would target enemy craft, missiles, and then enemy ships, while bombers would target only enemy ships. Now that bombers and fighters are rolled into a single strikecraft unit, we need to see how they behave so we can predict how they'll work. For this, there aren't any stats that will tell me how they behave, and there's no way to manually set their behavior in battle. So, we're going to set up a test using a cruiser model as the target, armed with missiles and scoutcraft. We'll run this test for each variation of strikecraft, including amoebas and swarmcraft. For scoutcraft, we can see they act like old fighters, targeting incoming enemy craft and missiles before targeting enemy ships. For strikecraft Mark 1, Mark 2, and Mark 3, they all act like old bombers, targeting only enemy ships. For amoebas, it's the same as before. They act like bombers and attack only enemy ships. And lastly, for swarmcraft, they also act like old bombers, attacking only enemy ships. Based on this, we can see that anything besides scouts now has bomber AI, so from here on out, we don't need to see how well strikecraft do against missiles, or at fighting other strikecraft directly. We also get to see another nerf, though this one is purely graphical, in that strikecraft can now only shoot red lasers, as opposed to before 2.0, where each tier had a different color, namely red, purple, and green, for Mark 1 to Mark 3 respectively. While disappointing, this does not impact compatibility. So why mention it? I don't know. I'm just genuinely disappointed. Be that as it may, we have our answers. So let's move on to module interactions. Now let's see whether strikecraft benefit from auxiliary and AI modules from their carriers. For this test, I designed this sneaky little corvette with 115.2 evasion, and we're going to pit it against the Swarm Strikecraft, which has 100% accuracy and 0% tracking by default. We've also made 3 models of carriers for the Swarm Strikecraft. Model A has no boost to accuracy or tracking at all, making 100% accuracy and 0% tracking overall. Model B has boost to accuracy, but not to tracking, making 130% accuracy and 0% tracking overall. And Model C has boost to both accuracy and tracking, making 135% accuracy and 20% tracking overall. Here, Model A acts as our control group, since there are no modifiers. And based on the lack of modifiers, we can expect, or rather predict, Model A to miss every shot against the Corvette. If Model A manages to hit and damage the Corvette, then something in the game is broken. Either some stat is listed incorrectly, or the game is calculating things incorrectly. Hopefully, this won't happen. Model B exists to see whether accuracy can go above 100% and whether any accuracy bonus is applied to the strikecraft. By default, no weapon has an accuracy rating above 100%, but ship AI can grant plus chance to hit, which is a raw accuracy modifier, meaning a plus 10 chance to hit changes a weapon's accuracy from 60% to 70%. Assuming plus chance to hit works the same as other plus raw stats like evasion. Model B will help confirm if that is indeed how these things work. As such, Model B will give our Swarmcraft 130% accuracy, assuming that A, accuracy can go above 100%, and B, assuming that ship AI applies to Strikecraft. So, if Model B manages to hit and damage the Corvette when Model A did not, we know that both these assumptions are true. If Model B fails to hit, we know that at least one assumption is not true. Lastly, we have Model C, and its job is to confirm Model B and narrow the results. Model C adds both accuracy and tracking, giving the carrier plus 35 tracking. This means that if the tracking of carrier applies to Strikecraft, the Strikecraft will have 35% tracking, and thus we can expect at least 20% of the shots to land, more if accuracy can go above 100%. So, if Model B does not hit and Model C does, we know that tracking bonuses apply from carriers to Strikecraft, and that accuracy cannot go above 100%. And if Model C does not hit, we know that tracking bonuses of carriers do not apply to Strikecraft. So, we go through and run each model test, as you'll notice I've been doing in the background already, and the results are as follows. Model A, of course, screws everything up because it does manage to hit the Corvette, albeit at a very low rate. However, after some brief examination, I discovered the problem. Evasion is capped at 90%. As you can see from these pictures, even though evasion is shown to go well above 100% in the ship designer, on actual examination, evasion caps at 90%. So, this means instead of expecting 0% of the shots to hit, we can expect 10% to hit, which seems to fit what we observed in Model A's test. Nevertheless, we can continue by using our eyeballs and judgment as to whether Model B and C manage to hit at a higher rate, at least for now. Alright? Alright. So, Model B then ends up seeming to have the same performance as Model A. Lastly, Model C has a much better performance than both Model A and Model B, as we had hoped. This means we learned 3 things from this test series. Number 1, evasion caps at 90%. We know this because we saw Model A landing hits against the Corvette, and we saw that in practice, the evasion is capped at 90%. Number 2, accuracy caps at 100%. We know this because Model B performed roughly the same as Model A, but Model C performed better, meaning Strikecraft do in fact benefit from ship modules, but their effectiveness does cap out at 100% accuracy. And lastly, number 3, Strikecraft benefit from ship modules that enhance accuracy and tracking. Again, we know this because Model C performed better than Model B and A. So, now that we know this, let's go ahead and start comparing the Strikecraft directly. Now we enter my wheelhouse. We get down to the nitty-gritty, the charts, the math. So, first and foremost, let's look at them stats and color code them for comparison. As you can see on the left, I set out the stats for each Strikecraft and compared the raw stats with color to visually set out the highs and lows, with green being highest or best, yellow high to mid, orange low mid, and red at low. From here we can see that the Mark III Strikecraft has overall the best raw stats with great accuracy, decent damage, excellent cooldown, and great defense as well. We also see that the Strikecraft Mark II and Mark I appear to have good stats as well, with damage and defense decreasing as you go towards Mark I, as can be expected. Scouts, unsurprisingly, have the lowest damage and defense. Nothing new there. However, what is surprising is that Swarm Strikers have only slightly higher estimated DPS than the Scouts. This seems to be due to the fact that despite Swarm Strikers having an average damage per unit of 10, while Mark III have an average of 9, and the Swarm have 2 more units at any given time, the Swarm Strikecraft have a cooldown 4 times higher than the Mark III Strikecraft. Now, the Swarm Strikers also have an extra 16% damage done to armor. However, this only adds another 1.6 damage on average per unit, which ends up being about 16 damage, which comes out to about 1 unit, which does not make up the difference in cooldowns. This in turn makes Swarm Strikers seem horrifically bad, but we'll test to confirm. Lastly, we got our old buddies, the amoebas, which are probably the most interesting of the Strikecraft. They have very high raw damage, and even though their cooldown is 150% above the rest of the Strikecraft, so is their damage. As such, they really only fall short when it comes to accuracy and tracking. Also, they're a bit less defensive and a bit slower, but neither of these shortcomings seem to be deal breakers. What makes them interesting is that they will benefit from the plus chance to hit modifiers, while the rest of the Strikecraft will not. So, this means that if you use Sentient AI Line Computer for the battleships, and also use the Auxiliary Fire Control, you can boost the amoeba's accuracy to 100%. We also have to note here that the listed average DPS is still wrong for the amoebas. Every weapon in the game, other than amoeba, has the average DPS listed as the average damage divided by the cooldown times the accuracy, and then also times the units for Strikecraft. Amoebas, however, don't take accuracy into account and just list the average damage divided by cooldown times unit. So, yeah, that's still a thing. Anyway, this brings me to the charts on the right. The top chart is just for reference, estimating the average stats for each endgame ship other than the Colossus. The middle charts look at what the average expected accuracy is against each type of target, and then looks at what the expected DPS would be. Now, this chart is a raw chart, and it assumes evasion can go to 100% or higher. We know that's wrong now. And we know that ship modifiers apply to Strikecraft. As such, you can consider this chart, the middle charts that is, to just be some raw estimates for me. So, this brings me to my bottom charts, which take into account max evasion, the tracking from tier 4 sensors, and the Sentient Battleship Line AI, which I figure to be the most common and or the most middle of the road. From this chart, we can see that amoebas are actually expected to perform about as well as Strikecraft Mark 2.5 would, but we can expect Strikecraft Mark 3 to still come out on top, which makes a lot of sense given the stats and modifiers we know about. However, we also see that without modifiers, amoebas are expected to perform only slightly better than Mark 1 Strikecraft. Again, this is why I think amoebas are so interesting. Anyway, from here, it's time to test. And you'll note I've been doing some of the tests in the background, but let's get serious. For this test, we'll do 5 engagements of 10 on 10 fights, with each model fighting each other model, just to be safe. And the models you can go ahead and see right here. And of course, testing breaks literally all of our predictions. It turns out, amoebas are actually better than Mark III Strikecraft, easily wiping the floor with them in each engagement. And it turns out that Swarm Strikecraft are better than Mark II on average. They did lose one engagement, but won the other 4 quite easily. So it's safe to say Swarm beat Mark II, but not by that much. Swarm do lose, however, to Mark III, so at least that holds true. So, if you're keeping track at home, the power tier goes like this. Amoeba at the top, followed by Mark III Strikecraft, followed by Swarm, then Mark II, and then Mark I. But wait! There's a surprise contender. You'll remember, back at the start of the video, I noted that Scout Wings still retain Fighter AI, meaning they will actually try to take out enemy Strikecraft. Well, just like in my very first carrier operations video, fighters reign supreme. The Scoutcraft were able to stand against every other model of Strikecraft, disable them, and then continue to win the fight with only minimal damage suffered to their fleet. They did have the most trouble against Swarm, which makes sense since Swarm Strikers also have the highest defense, but even against them, the Scouts came out on top. So, the real score in terms of sheer air power is this. Number 1, Scouts. Number 2, Amoebas. Number 3, Mark III Strikecraft. Number 4, Swarm Strikers. Number 5, Mark II Strikecraft. And last and most certainly least, number 6, the Mark I Strikecraft. This is why we test, people. None of the predictions were right, and all of the minds are blown. Now, I can get behind amoebas being better than we predicted, since a plus 50% modifier might mean a bit more when each shot does more damage, but I have no idea why Swarm Strikers managed as well as they did. Strangely, amoebas even outperformed Mark III Strikecraft when I took away the accuracy and tracking bonuses from the ship modules. So, Even if you were to use artillery AI, the amoebas would still hold their place, as would the swarmers. If anything, my only explanation might be that strikecraft speed is too high, meaning they keep circling out of range or something, but I didn't exactly see anything to support that, so I really don't know, and that wild guess is honestly my best guess. But at this point, I don't think the game wants us to know why. Oh, and before anyone brings it up in the comments, this has nothing to do with excess power. The difference in excess power between ship models gives around a 0.1% damage difference between the models. So no, excess power is not the reason for anything here. At any rate, we got our results. So, let's summarize everything up below. We learned a lot today, folks. First, we learned that the new strike craft all have bomber behavior, except scouts, which still have fighter AI. Then, we learned that evasion caps at 90%, accuracy caps at 100%, and strike craft benefit from ship modules that increase accuracy and tracking. This means that amoebas benefit the most from modules, since they're the only strike craft that don't have native capped accuracy, and conversely, other strike craft all have native capped accuracy, so they don't benefit as much. Lastly, we learned in terms of winning battles, scouts are able to dominate the skies, and then amoebas have highest damage performance, followed by Mark IIIs, swarmers, Mark IIs, and lastly Mark I strike craft. So, this means that if you're going to use strike craft, you'll want to use amoebas and use line AI to boost the amoeba's performance for the best results, especially as you go against smaller ship classes. But, if you're going for a more defensive role, you'll want to use a mix of scouts and amoebas. After all, scouts don't do a ton of damage, but they will control the skies, and amoebas, as we've seen, have the highest damage output. So, that'll do it for now. As always, if you think I missed something, or if you got an idea for another episode, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, I'll say so long for now, and I'll see you next time, Space Cowboys. Enjoy the video? Well, hey, you should consider subscribing, or maybe checking out some of these other videos, or hey, why don't you leave a like? It'll help the channel grow. Or you can leave me a comment, maybe give me an idea for another video. Anyway, I'll see you next time.